Al Pacino was signing autographs outside a Manhattan restaurant when a young woman approached with an envelope. Inside was a DNA test result that would shatter everything he thought he knew about his life. What Al read in that document didn't just prove paternity, it revealed a 20-year cover-up that had been orchestrated by his closest friends. It was October 15, 2003, a crisp autumn evening in New York City. Al had just finished dinner at Raua's, his favorite Italian restaurant on East 114th Street. The paparazzi were waiting outside, as they always were, but Al was used to this routine. Sign a few autographs, smile for the cameras, get into his car, and go home. But as Al stepped onto the sidewalk, a young woman with striking dark eyes pushed through the crowd of photographers and fans. She was maybe 22 years old, with olive skin and an intensity in her gaze that looked startlingly familiar. "Mr. Pacino," she said, her voice steady, but her hands shaking. "I need you to see this." Al's bodyguard moved to intercept her, but something about the woman's demeanor made Al pause. She wasn't holding a camera or a pen for an autograph. She was holding a manila envelope, and the way she clutched it suggested it contained something far more important than fan mail. "What is it?" "And this," she held up the envelope, "proves that you're my father." The crowd around them went silent. Cameras stopped flashing. Even the restaurant's doorman stopped moving. Al felt his chest tighten, but his face remained expressionless, a skill honed by decades of method acting. "I don't know what you're talking about," Al said quietly. "I think you have me confused with someone else." But Sofia didn't back down. "Maria Santos, 1981. You met her at a film festival in Miami. You were 41, she was 23. Ring any bells?" Al's blood turned to ice. Maria Santos. He hadn't heard that name in over 2 decades, but suddenly, every detail came flooding back. The film festival. The young actress with dreams bigger than her talent. The 3 weeks they'd spent together before he returned to New York, and she disappeared from his life. "I don't," Al started, but Sofia cut him off. "She's dead, Mr. Pacino. Car accident, 3 years ago. But before she died, she told me everything. About the letters you ignored, about the money you refused to send, about the lawyers who threatened her if she ever went public." Sofia opened the envelope and pulled out a single sheet of paper. "This is a DNA test. I had it done using a hair sample from the barber shop you've been going to for 15 years. Benny Torrino on Mulberry Street, right? He's my mother's cousin." Al's mind was reeling. Benny, his barber of 15 years, was related to Maria. The implications crashed over him like a tsunami. This wasn't just about a long-lost daughter. This was about a conspiracy that had been hiding in plain sight. Sofia handed him the paper. 99.97% probability. "You are my father. The question is, what are you going to do about it?" Al stared at the document, the numbers and medical terminology blurring together. Around them, the crowd had grown larger, sensing drama. Cell phone cameras were starting to appear, but Al barely noticed. "We can't talk here," he said finally. "Too many people." "I've waited 22 years to talk to you," Sofia said. "I can wait a little longer, but I'm not going away. Not this time." Al looked at his bodyguard. "Tony, clear us a path. We're going to my apartment." 30 minutes later, they sat in Al's Upper West Side penthouse, the city lights twinkling below them through floor-to-ceiling windows. Sofia perched on the edge of an expensive leather sofa, while Al paced back and forth, the DNA results clutched in his hand. "Tell me about your mother," Al said finally. "Tell me about Maria." Sofia's eyes softened for the first time since their confrontation outside the restaurant. "She was beautiful, and stubborn, and completely in love with you. I cared about her too," Al said quietly, "but it was complicated. I was at a different place in my career. In my life. I wasn't ready for a family?" Sofia's voice carried an edge of bitterness. "Or for a family with a poor Puerto Rican actress who wasn't going to help your image." The accusation hit Al like a physical blow. "It wasn't about that, wasn't it?" Sofia stood up and walked to the window. "My mother told me you found out she was pregnant in January 1982. You were filming Scarface at the time. She flew to Los Angeles to tell you in person." Al closed his eyes, remembering. It had been one of the most intense periods of his career. He was so deep into the Tony Montana character that he was barely functioning as himself. When Maria showed up on set with news of the pregnancy, he'd been wearing Tony's white suit, his mind still swimming in Cuban accent and cocaine-fueled paranoia. "I told her I needed time to think," Al said. "I was in the middle of the most demanding role of my career. I couldn't process it." "She waited," Sofia said. "For 3 months, she waited in a cheap motel in Hollywood, hoping you'd call. Do you know what it's like to be 24, pregnant, alone, and waiting for a phone call that never comes?" Al sat down heavily in his chair. "I was going to call. I wanted to call. But then your people got involved," Sofia interrupted. "My mother told me about the visit. July 1982. 2 men in expensive suits came to her motel room. They said they represented you. They offered her $50,000 to disappear, to never contact you again, to never tell anyone who the father was." Al's head snapped up. "What? No, I never. Who were these men?" She described one of them perfectly. Tall, silver hair, spoke with a slight Italian accent, called himself Mr. Romano. Al's face went white. Vincent Romano, his manager at the time, his trusted advisor, his friend. Vincent, Al whispered. Son of a bitch. You didn't know? Sofia asked, studying his reaction. I had no idea. I thought Maria had just moved on. I thought she'd decided she didn't want anything to do with me. Al's voice was getting louder, his famous intensity building. Vincent told me he'd tried to contact her but couldn't find her. He said she'd probably gotten an abortion and moved back to Puerto Rico. Sofia's expression softened slightly. She refused the money. She told them she didn't want anything from you except acknowledgement, just for you to know your daughter existed. Then what happened? They threatened her, said that if she ever went public, they would destroy her career and her family. They had photos of her mother working as a house cleaner for wealthy families in Miami. They said those families wouldn't appreciate knowing their help was associated with Hollywood scandals. Al felt sick. Vincent had been like a father figure to him, guiding his career through the dangerous waters of Hollywood politics. But he'd also been ruthless in protecting Al's image, sometimes in ways Al had never fully understood. So she stayed quiet, Sofia continued. But she kept writing to you. Letters, photos of me growing up. She sent them to your home address, your agent's office, even hand-delivered them to studio security. Did you ever see any of them? Al shook his head. Vincent handled all my mail. He said he filtered out the crazies to protect my privacy. Sofia reached into her purse and pulled out a stack of yellowed envelopes, all addressed to Al in careful handwriting. These are copies. She kept everything. Birthday photos, report cards, school plays. She documented my entire childhood for a father who never acknowledged I existed. Al took the letters with trembling hands. The top envelope was postmarked August 1982, just a month after Sofia was born. He opened it with the delicacy of someone handling ancient artifacts. Dear Al, he read aloud, I want you to meet your daughter. Her name is Sofia, and she has your eyes. I'm not asking for money or fame. I just want you to know that she's here, and she's beautiful, and she's part of you. Al's voice broke on the last words. He looked up at Sofia, seeing her clearly for the first time. The dark, intense eyes, the strong jawline, the way she held herself with quiet confidence. How had he not seen it immediately? She looks like me, he whispered. She always said I did. It made her happy and sad at the same time. Sofia sat back down, closer to Al now. She never stopped loving you, even when you never responded. Even when the lawyers kept threatening her, she believed that someday you'd come looking for us. But I never did. No, you never did. They sat in silence for several minutes, the weight of 22 years of separation settling between them. Finally, Al spoke. Tell me about your childhood. Tell me what I missed. Sofia's story unfolded slowly, painfully. Growing up in Miami with a mother who worked 3 jobs to support them, Maria had refused to take a penny of the money Vincent's people had eventually left at her door, so they lived paycheck to paycheck. Sofia was a good student, involved in drama club, dreaming of following in her parents' footsteps as an actor. But I was angry too, Sofia admitted, angry at the father who didn't want me, angry at the mother who wouldn't fight harder for me, angry at a world that told me I wasn't worth acknowledging. Did you know, growing up, did you know who your father was? Mom told me when I turned 16. She sat me down with a scrapbook full of your movies, your interviews, your photos. She said she wanted me to understand why it was so complicated. You weren't just any man, you were Al Pacino. Your life was public, scrutinized, protected by people who cared more about your image than about truth. Al winced. That's no excuse for abandoning my child. She never called it abandonment. She called it sacrifice. She said you were sacrificing your relationship with me to protect both our privacy. I believed that for a while. What changed? Sofia pulled out a newspaper clipping. This, July 2001. Al looked at the headline. Al Pacino welcomes twins with girlfriend Beverly D'Angelo. You had twins, Sofia said quietly. Julie Marie and Anton James. You were 61 years old. You held press conferences, gave interviews about the joy of fatherhood, talked about how being a father was the most important thing in the world to you. Al closed his eyes. The twins, his pride and joy with Beverly. He'd been so public about his happiness, so open about his love for them. I realized then that it wasn't about privacy or protection or sacrifice, Sofia continued. It was about choice. You chose those children. You didn't choose me. The accusation hung in the air like smoke. Al opened his mouth to defend himself, to explain, but what could he say? She was right. I didn't know you existed, he said finally. If I had known, you did know. On some level, you had to know. You never followed up with my mother. Never tried to find out what happened after she told you she was pregnant. You just accepted Vincent's story and moved on with your life. Al felt something break inside his chest. She was right again. Deep down, in the part of himself he'd never examined, he'd known. He'd chosen not to dig deeper because it was easier. Because his life was already complicated enough without adding an unplanned child with a struggling actress. You're right, he said quietly. I failed you. I failed your mother. I failed myself. Sofia studied his face, looking for deception, for performance. But Al Pacino wasn't acting now. This was raw truth, and she could see it in every line of his face. "The DNA test," Al said. "How did you finally get it done?" "Benny, my mother's cousin. She asked him to help before she died. He'd been cutting your hair for years, collecting samples, waiting for the right moment. When Mom passed, he gave me everything. And you decided to confront me. I decided I wanted to know my father, even if he rejected me again." Al looked at this young woman, his daughter, with a mixture of pride and heartbreak. She had his intensity, his determination, his refusal to be intimidated. But she also had something he'd lost years ago: hope. "What do you want from me now?" he asked. Sofia was quiet for a long moment. "I want to know who you are. Not the actor, not the legend. I want to know my father. And if I disappoint you, if I'm not the man you hoped I'd be." Sofia smiled for the first time that evening. "Dad, I've been disappointed by you my entire life. The bar is pretty low." The simple word "dad" hit Al like a thunderbolt. No one had called him that with such directness, such claim to the title. It was terrifying and wonderful, and completely overwhelming. "Vincent," Al said suddenly. "I need to deal with Vincent." Sofia nodded. "He's not the only one. There were others. Lawyers, assistants, people who knew and kept quiet. They thought they were protecting me. They were protecting their jobs. There's a difference." Al stood up and walked to his phone. Vincent Romano was 78 years old now, retired but still living in Beverly Hills. Al hadn't spoken to him in 5 years, but he still had his number. Vincent answered on the third ring. "Al? Jesus, what time is it? We need to talk, Vincent. Now. It's almost midnight, Al. Can't this wait?" Al looked at Sofia, sitting on his couch, her entire life story contained in a stack of yellowed letters and a DNA test result. "I just met my daughter, Vincent. The one you told me didn't exist. The one you paid to disappear. The one you've been lying about for 22 years. The silence on the other end of the line stretched for what felt like forever. "Al, no. Don't say anything. I'm flying out to Los Angeles tomorrow. We're going to have a conversation and you're going to tell me everything. Every lie, every payoff, every decision you made about my life without asking me." Al hung up without waiting for a response. "He's going to deny everything," Sofia said. "Probably, but I'll know if he's lying. I've spent my entire career studying human behavior, reading people's truths. I'll know." Sofia stood up. "I should go. This has been a lot." "Wait." Al reached for her hand. "I know I have no right to ask this, but will you give me a chance to try to be your father, to try to make up for 22 years of absence?" Sofia looked down at their joined hands. His were lined and weathered, marked by decades of chain smoking and intense living. Hers were young and strong, unburdened by the weight of fame and regret. "I can't promise it'll be easy," she said. "I'm angry. I'm hurt. And I don't trust easily. I understand. And I won't pretend those 22 years didn't happen. I won't pretend that finding out about your twins wasn't devastating. I won't pretend that growing up without a father didn't shape who I am." Al nodded. "I wouldn't ask you to. But," Sofia continued, "I also can't pretend that I don't want to know you. I've thought about you every day of my life. I've imagined conversations we might have, places we might go together, things you might teach me. So yes, I'll give you a chance. One chance. That's all I can ask for." Sofia gathered her purse and the letters Al had read. "I have an apartment in Brooklyn. I'm a theater major at NYU. I work at a coffee shop in Greenwich Village to pay rent. I like long walks and old movies, and I hate seafood. I read everything you've ever said in interviews, watched every movie you've ever made, studied every character you've ever played. I probably know you better than you know yourself." Al smiled despite the emotional weight of the evening. "That's terrifying. It should be. I've had 22 years to figure out what I want to say to you. You're starting from scratch." She headed for the door, then turned back. "One more thing. My mother. She never stopped believing that you were a good man who'd been given bad information. She said that when you finally learned the truth, you'd do the right thing. She had more faith in you than you had in yourself." The door closed behind her, leaving Al alone with the DNA results, a stack of unread letters, and the overwhelming realization that his life had just changed forever. The next morning, Al flew to Los Angeles for his confrontation with Vincent Romano. He found his former manager in his Beverly Hills mansion, looking every one of his 78 years. "You look terrible," Vincent said as he opened the door. "Tell me about Maria Santos," Al said without preamble. "Tell me about my daughter. Tell me about every lie you've told me for the past 22 years. Vincent's face crumpled. "Al, you have to understand, it was a different time. Your career was just taking off. A scandal like that could have destroyed everything. So you decided for me. You made choices about my life, my child, without asking me. You were in no condition to make rational decisions. You were deep into Scarface, barely sleeping, barely eating. You were becoming Tony Montana. I couldn't let you make life-altering decisions in that state. So you paid off the mother of my child and told me she'd disappeared." Vincent sat down heavily. "I thought I was protecting you. You were protecting your percentage of my earnings. You were protecting your reputation as the manager who kept his clients scandal-free." For an hour, Vincent confessed everything. The threatening visits to Maria, the intercepted letters, the lawyers who'd been instructed to make the problem go away, the web of lies that had grown larger and more complicated with each passing year. "I'm sorry, Al. I thought I was doing what was best. The best thing would have been letting me decide for myself what I wanted to do about my daughter." Al left Vincent's house that afternoon, knowing he'd never speak to his former manager again. Some betrayals were too fundamental to forgive. He spent the next 3 months getting to know Sofia. Coffee meetings that stretched into dinner. Walks through Central Park where she told him about her dreams and fears. Movies at his apartment where he shared stories from his early career. It wasn't easy. 22 years of resentment didn't disappear overnight. Sofia had walls, and Al had guilt that sometimes paralyzed him with its intensity. But slowly, carefully, they began to build something that resembled a relationship. 6 months after that first encounter outside Rao's, Al attended Sofia's college graduation. He sat in the audience of NYU's theater department, watching his daughter receive her degree in dramatic arts, and felt a pride so intense it nearly broke him. After the ceremony, Sofia found him in the crowd. "You came," she said. "I wouldn't have missed it." Al replied, "I've already missed too much." She hugged him then, for the first time, and Al realized that some things were worth waiting for, even when the waiting came at such a terrible cost. The story of Al Pacino and his secret daughter Sofia became one of Hollywood's most closely guarded secrets. Only a handful of people knew the truth about the DNA test, the confrontation, the 22 years of denial. But for Al, it became the most important role he'd ever played, not an actor playing a father, but a father learning how to love a daughter he'd lost before he'd ever known he had her. And sometimes, if you knew what to look for, you could catch glimpses of Sofia in the audience at Al's performances, watching her father with the intensity she'd inherited from him, finally able to see the man behind the legend, flawed, human, and trying to make up for lost time.